So our next storyteller is also someone I draw inspiration from. And inspiration, a lot of times, is about people you agree with, people who you really like, people who you really have a lot in common with. But sometimes inspiration is about that person you hear on the radio and you say, what is he talking about? I know that's wrong. Our next storyteller does that to me all the time. If you hear him on 910 Superstation, he calls himself the urban conservative. Now, I have always wanted to sit and talk with him about that phrase, because I don't even understand where you get that phrase from. Urban conservative, what is that? What does that mean? But I do listen, and I do learn. And over the last couple of years, I have come to really like this person and really respect where he's coming from. That doesn't mean I agree. It doesn't mean sometimes I'm not cursing at the radio. But it does mean I listen. And that is what matters. That's why I wanted him to come and tell you guys a story tonight, because I think you will learn and connect as much with him as I do. So Kerry Leon Jackson, you are next.
Started with a phone call. Just over 3 years ago, a friend of mine, a friend that I've known for over 30 years, because we attended Thomas Cooley Law School together back in the 80s, someone that many of you know is a young lady by the name of the Honorable Vonda Evans. Vonda and I have been friends since at least 1986. Vonda had a show at 9:10 a.m. Superstation on Saturday afternoons. Her and I believe Mary Sheffield was her partner. And she had an upcoming show in which she wanted to discuss the Flint water crisis. Now, she called me and she said, look, I need a Republican voice. And she explained that she knew, she said, listen, this is talk radio. Everybody's gonna share their opinion. They're probably not going to agree with you. But I need to know if you can come on and defend Rick Snyder. What Vonda knew is that for at least the last 30 years, I have never shied away from stepping up in front of a microphone, standing in front of lights, telling the story of whether it's a client or it's a politician that I'm working to get elected to elective office. I have never been afraid to take the heat for those that I've been working to represent and those that I believe in. Back in 1985, I moved to Michigan. I moved to Lansing, Michigan, in order to attend law school from Chicago. I was born and raised a Democrat, not just a regular sit-at-home kind of Democrat, but the kind that my mother, my sisters, my cousins, every aunt and uncle, every election day worked all of the polls. We worked in Chicago as part of the machine. So we know exactly where the bodies are buried, and I can tell you what vote early and often really means. There was no way on earth, well, just stick with me on this story. Born and raised a Democrat, knew that I'd gotten accepted into a law school, the Thomas Cooley Law School, and at that point in time, the main building for Thomas Cooley was exactly across the street from the state capitol. Now, I knew that while I was in law school, I would need a job, because I didn't have a lot of money. In my mind, 21 years old at that point in time, I thought, you know what? I'm born and raised a Democrat. I've been going door to door since I was 7 years old. I've got years and years of political experience. All I got to do is show up over in that building, and they're just going to automatically give me a job that's going to make sure that I can eat and take care of myself for the 3 years that I'm in law school. The first Monday that I'm in town, I put on my best blue suit, white shirt, red tie, grabbed my resume, headed over to the Capitol. I head to the personnel office for the Democratic Party, for the House of Representatives. I walk in, I presented the young lady at the door with my resume. I asked if I could fill out an application. I inquired about whether or not there were positions currently available or coming available soon. She took my resume, and then she crushed my world. She said that they didn't have any openings. They weren't going to have any openings. She could never envision a time that they would be hiring anybody for at least the next 3 years. I was devastated. Understand, 21 years old, had never anticipated being turned away from what, in my mind, I thought was a perfect fit. Didn't have a clue what I was going to do. Walking down the hall, I wasn't crying. And if I was, I wasn't going to tell you that I was crying. But I was walking down the hallway, and all I could say is, God, give me a sign. You've done that before and said, God, show me a sign. And I got to tell you something. In my mind, to this day, I will testify that that sign was 10 feet tall, 6 feet wide. In reality, it was a regular sign. It was about, 14 inches long, 5 feet wide, 5 inches wide. And the sign said, House Republican Personnel Office. And some little voice back here that I can't control said, why not? So I walked into that office. I presented the young lady that greeted me at that desk with a copy of my resume. I asked for an application, and I inquired about whether or not they would have any positions open anytime soon. She gave me that sort of puzzled, you're lost look. However, she didn't crush my world. She walked to the back and got the personnel director for the House Republican caucus, and she brought that young lady out. That young lady invited me back in her office. She asked me questions about my career, my future, my hopes, my dreams, my aspirations. She engaged me in a real conversation. It was not an interview. It was just a talk. She arranged for me to go to lunch that day with another staffer from the House Republican caucus. He took me to a little restaurant over on Washington in downtown Lansing. He asked a lot of small talk. I knew good and well that what he was doing. He was basically trying to feel me out to see if I knew anything about being a Republican or working for Republicans. Now, what he didn't know is that the job that I left in order to go to law school, when I was in Chicago, I originally worked for a local chamber of commerce while I was there, and then went to work for the United States Chamber of Commerce. So I learned to walk and talk pro-business politics all day, every day for a living. So yeah, I was prepared for this luncheon where he's going to ask me all of these questions to see if I know how to talk like a Republican. Think I did pretty good at that luncheon. They arranged for me later on in the week to wind up meeting with somebody many of you might remember, an attorney from Detroit by the name of Ed Johnson. Ed was, at that point in time, the second vice chair of the Republican Party. Second vice chair used to be the black chair. Ed showed up, knocked on my door, took me out to get a cup of coffee, asked me if I'd be able to go with him to go door to door that following Saturday over in Grand Rapids. They were going into an area that was a black area, and they were doing it for a Republican candidate. I said, sure, I can do that. We went, we had a great time. Ed stood by me and watched me the entire time, and he kept saying a phrase that still sticks in my mind about, you speak so well. And obviously, I had a good time, and I did well, because that Monday, Ed made a phone call to the House Republican personnel staff, and I got a job that day, within a week of being in Lansing. Now, important to know, getting a job working for the Republicans doesn't make you a Republican. What made me conservative is believing in enterprise zones in black communities to get people employed. What made me conservative is watching how, while I was a teenager, long before I became a Republican, how teenage young women that I knew wound up being mentally and physically devastated by abortions to the point that I said, oh my God, I can't believe that this is happening in our community. What made me Republican, many of you will know about this, is going to a Southern Baptist church, being raised in a Southern Baptist church where you learn family values from 8 o'clock in the morning on Sunday to 8 o'clock at night on Sunday, where you learn things like pro-family values, marriage between a man and a woman. These are the sort of things that I had ingrained in me all of my life. Even though I'd been raised as a Democrat, apparently I had all of these conservative views inside of me. Working that job the entire time while I was in law school gave me an opportunity to work on plenty of, probably at least about 100 state, local, and federal elections. I worked with people that some of you may have heard of, such as George Herbert Walker Bush. We worked 3 years to get him elected president. And I worked for a young man by the name of John Engler, who I knew in the Senate while I worked there. And let me just tell you a little story about what happened after I finished law school. I finished law school, get a job offer. The job is in Detroit. I had never lived in Detroit. I'm from Chicago, had lived in Lansing. Had 2 friends that told me, get you an apartment downtown, you're gonna have so much fun, you're gonna never wanna leave. That was in 1988. I haven't left. So, yes, I had fun. But while I was here, got a phone call from Lansing, said, Senate leader, who was at that point in time John Engler, wanted to run for governor. So I wound up going to some meetings up in Lansing. We worked very hard to get him elected. Getting him elected had absolutely nothing at all to do with being as part of the news. But that same year, you'll remember that your basketball team, the Detroit Pistons, won their first championship. The Pistons swept in 4 games the LA Lakers. Remember, get an apartment downtown, you can have so much fun. I had an apartment downtown. The night that the Pistons won, all of these people show up downtown, horns blowing, everybody's got a broom hanging out of the window because the Pistons swept the Lakers. I went outside, walked around a little while, saw that the crowd was growing, saw that the crowd was getting wild, saw that windows were being broken and knew I was black. Go home right now, don't stay here. I went back to my apartment, climbed into bed, 3 o'clock in the morning, the phone rings. It was 2 of my friends from Lansing, 2 young ladies, 2 small-framed young ladies who are also, by the way, very, very light-skinned. They were in the cars with their boyfriends. Apparently, the Detroit police had tried to steer the traffic away from downtown and back onto the highway, and the boyfriend made a turn that he should not have made. Car got rushed by the police, and all of them got beat up. So I get this phone call at 3 in the morning. They're on the phone, they're crying. I go around the police headquarters, and that night, 3 o'clock in the morning, standing on the steps of 1300 Beaubien, I gave my first media interview. It was for Channel 7, and they said, listen, you got to be really quick, you got to be really concise, go right now. And they turned that light on. The light looks like this one. And something happened in here and in here when that light went on. I stood up and I said, I am outraged. I demand discipline and I'm gonna file a lawsuit. That quick interview did 2 things. One, it traveled very, very far and wide, and that's what happens when things are covered by the media, is everybody sees it. 2 is I had some real consequences the next morning because I worked for the state of Michigan. I wasn't allowed to go out getting clients. However, I knew that was no stopping me, that I wanted to step in front of the microphone and stand in front of a camera, in front of those lights, and defend my friends and my clients from now on. Now, one of those friends, as I've told you about, was John Engler. He gets elected. Now, getting him elected was one thing. The problem occurred when we decided to work very hard to get him re-elected as governor of the state of Michigan. I had been working for 4 years, courting Sam Logan, buying tickets to every chicken dinner, buying ad space, telling the John Engler story over and over again. And one night in 1994, I get this phone call from the governor's office, and they said, Kerry, tomorrow morning, you've got to be out on Woodward. The Chronicle, everything that we've done has finally come through. The Chronicle has decided to endorse John Engler against Howard Whoopi for governor. I actually had something. I was supposed to be in court somewhere else doing a deposition the next day, but I blew that off. I went and stood out on the corner out on Woodward, had copies of the Chronicle in my hand because we'd worked for this for 4 years. The very next day, my picture is on the front page of one of the dailies, on the inside front page of the other daily. Everybody knew that I was supporting John Engler's reelection, and I was very, very happy that the Chronicle had endorsed him. Later that day, I get a phone call. Kerry, we need you to go over, meet Elroy Saylor, stand in front of the Michigan Chronicle headquarters. You're going to be interviewed by Roger Weber from TV4. So that's all I was told. I go over, I'm thinking I'm just going to go over and give an interview about how hard we had worked to get this endorsement. They did not tell me that there was a very large crowd of angry Detroiters who were burning copies of the Michigan Chronicle, who were out for blood. Now, let me just tell you this. You might remember what Roger Weber looks like. Understand this. He was not a bodyguard. They were angry. I got called every name in the book. Uncle Tom, Sambo, sellout, everything that you can imagine. A black Republican standing in front of a very large crowd of hostile Detroiters can be called, and they were angry. I wasn't afraid. I stood there and I stood my ground because I've always decided that I'm going to stand and defend my party and whoever I'm representing at that moment. In that moment, I was representing John Engler. Representing John Engler at that interview in front of the Michigan Chronicle got me appointed as full-time 36th District Court magistrate. While at 36th District Court, many of you know that there's this, it's called it the perp walk. It's an arraignment courtroom. You get a chance to make news every week because somebody's going to commit a crime and the cameras are going to show up. The one case that really, really stuck out while I was there was a young man by the name of Martell Welch. Many of you remember young Mr. Welch because he got our city national press coverage. The allegations were that on a Sunday night on the Belle Isle Bridge, allegedly while there were people chanting and encouraging him on, that he allegedly either chased the lethal word or threw the lethal word over the bridge. We not only made national press coverage, you'll understand and remember, we also got in LA a law and order story told that said this was happening and things like that had happened. When I arraigned him, it was pretty much just your normal 2 or 3 cameras in the courtroom, nothing's really gonna happen. You know, you come in, his lawyer showed up, told me he went to U of M, where he worked at, he had community ties. I set his bond at $250,000, 10%. I get home, turn to TV4, listen to the anchor dogged me because my bond was too low. I went to work the next day, and oh my God, this is what happens when stuff is covered in the media. It had gone far and wide. People from U of M made it their business to contact me the next day to say, he is not a U of M student, we don't know him, and he's not welcome here. The employer that was listed the prior day made sure that they sent a fax over to say he's never worked here, we don't know him, and he's not welcome here. I had been lied to. I don't like being lied to. I told my clerk to order him back out of the jail and bring him back over the next day. At no point did I ever tell her anything about alert the media. Simply told her, call his lawyer, call the prosecutor. 1 o'clock comes, which is arraignment time. I go out and the cameras have filled up the gallery. There was no room for family members, for the people being arraigned, for all of the press coverage that was there that day. Make a long story short, I arraigned him. I explained to him, I changed his bond on my own motion, made his lawyer upset, raised it from $250,000, 10% to $2 million cash, and made sure that she understood, don't ever come back here and lie to me ever again. Making the news was powerful. A couple of years later, I leave and go back out into private practice. And at that point, I was representing rapists, robbers, murderers, thieves, drug dealers. I got dozens of opportunities to stand in front of the camera and defend people. Wound up in 2004 defending a young man by the name of Eric Marshall. Eric Marshall, for those of you that have good memories, will remember that Eric Marshall decided one night to kill 2 police officers out on Livernois and Michigan Avenue. And they went to his house, they arrested him, and he was charged with murder. Family hired me. We're in the middle of the trial. I'm working my magic, doing the best that I can to try and get him out of trouble. There have been some press coverage up to that point in time, not a whole lot. Yeah, it was there every day, but nothing really had exciting that happened. Go to court one morning, I read this story that was written by Suzette Hackney, who I believe was at the Free Press at that point in time. She wrote a very good article where she pointed out all of the reasonable doubt that I had brought up the day before. And I'm thinking, this is looking good. We might potentially either get a not guilty or we're gonna wind up getting a hung jury or something. We're not about to lose. Again, understand what happens when the media is there. While the cameras were rolling that afternoon, my client, who I had worked very, very hard to try and get out of trouble that he had managed to get himself into, decided that he needed to beat up one of the witnesses right in front of the cameras. I don't really need to tell y'all what happened. Jury really wasn't out that long. Came back guilty as charged. I learned that, understand this, when things happen in front of the media, they have an impact. Quick and decisive impact. Several years later, I leave the practice of law. I go out and I decide that I'm going to form this political strategy lobbying firm. Spent a lot of time continuing to do what I had been doing up until that point in time. And then, a young man decided that he wanted to run for office, a young man by the name of Rick Snyder. I had never met him prior to that, but after meeting him, I thought he was nice. We liked him. He made it through the primary. He beat everyone else out. So I decided we're going to help him. We raised money, gave him money, had him in the black community over at Greater New Mount Moriah Church. We got him elected. There were meetings right after, if you remember, 2008, 2009, times were bad. There was a lot of people that had left. A lot of cities and school districts were broke. He had, at that point in time, a very, very good idea. Going to train a group of people. Those of you that know a lot about municipal finance, we're going to send them out all over the state to help all of these municipalities get back on the straight and narrow. Sounded like a good idea at the time. I have never, ever shied away from standing in front of the microphone and the lights to tell the story and to defend my party and those people who have entrusted me to tell their story, to put their spin on it. So when I get a phone call from the Honorable Vonda Evans saying, I need you to come and defend Rick Snyder, I wasn't afraid. I might not have been as prepared for the wrath of the AM radio audience that day. Again, Uncle Tom, Sambo, come on, I've heard all of these things before, but now I'm hearing them on the radio. How dare you? We're trying to recall him. What are you doing there? Who asked you to come on? Every bad thing that could happen. For those of you that have ever seen the picture that was taken of me that day, that first Saturday, all you see is anger and determination and frustration on my face because it was 2 hours of just arguing. That appearance led to another appearance and another appearance, and then all of these other folks wanted me to come and defend our governor and my party on their shows, which led to me becoming a co-host, which led to me getting my own show, and that's how we get to, I made a leap that Saturday from going out making the news to the point where we're now telling the news. Where if you call my show at 6 o'clock in the morning, we are discussing everything that is related to current topics, politics, anything. Now, I know that many of you are thinking what my listeners say on a regular basis is, Kerry, your current party is no longer the party that you joined back in 1985. Why won't you leave the party? Those people are no good. They don't like you. They hate you. And what about Donald Trump? Let me ask a question. I know it's dark in here, but show of hands, how many of you have ever been in a relationship with somebody that when you started that relationship out, everything was, grits and gravy. You had a good time. You were committed to them. You knew that y'all would be together forever. And then later on, that person you was in a relationship with turned out to be a no-good, lying, cheating, crackhead. Do you leave them when your girlfriends are calling and saying, you need to leave him now? I don't know why you still with him. Do you leave? You don't leave. You have made a commitment. There was a point in time when you loved that person you were in a relationship with. That party has been good to me. They have looked out for me over and over again, not just with paid clients and a lot of different appointments to things, but I hope and pray what you would do with that person when they're lying and cheating and using crack, you will take them to rehab. You would hope that they would get better. I'm going to try my best to take this party to rehab. I'm going to hope that they get better. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I know this. I'm going to try every day to make sure to tell you the truth, to explain to you what decisions were made and how, to tell you which rooms I've been in, and I want all that I'm asking you to do. I would never ask you to join the Republican Party, not the current one, never. All that I want you to do is to not think, you know what? He's a Republican. I'm not going to listen to him. I don't like him because he's got an R next to his name. All that I'm asking you to do is to ask some questions, to think a little deeper, to make up your own mind, and then make sure that you do something to improve our community. My name is Kerry Leon Jackson. I'm the Urban Conservative. Thank you for listening.